All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We are putting on our detective hats to investigate one of the most famous events in all of human history, but we're going to look at it from an angle you might not have considered. We're asking one very specific question. Was the execution of Jesus about religion, or was it all about politics? Let's start digging. And this quote, this is our primary clue. It just cuts right to the heart of the matter and forces us to kind of rethink what we thought we knew. You see, the Roman Empire was this incredibly efficient but also brutal machine. It wasn't really in the business of policing what people believed. It was in the business of power, pure and simple. And it had a very specific, very public punishment for anyone who threatened that power.
So I want you to think about it like this. The religious story that we all know, that's the official story, right? It's the report that's been handed down for 2,000 years. But today, we're conducting our own private investigation. We're dusting for prints, looking for the clues and the context that might have been left out of that final report, trying to see what this all looked like to the people who were actually in charge back then.
And this right here, this is the charge we need to zoom in on: sedition. In Roman eyes, this wasn't just another crime on the books. No way. This was the ultimate political sin. It was a direct challenge to the emperor, to the idea of Rome itself. The bottom line is, for Rome to use its most extreme punishment, crucifixion, the crime had to be just as extreme.
Okay, so before we can really understand the verdict, we have to understand the location, the scene of the crime. First-century Judea was not some quiet, peaceful place. Not at all. It was an occupied territory that was constantly, and I mean constantly, simmering on the edge of a full-blown revolt. It was, for all intents and purposes, a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
Let's just feel the pressure building up in that keg. First, you've got Roman soldiers everywhere, a constant, visible reminder of who's in charge. Then you have these crushing taxes, which people didn't just see as a financial burden, but as a tribute to a foreign, pagan emperor. Well, all that resentment fueled radical groups like the Zealots, who believed violent rebellion was the only answer. And woven through everything was this powerful, widespread belief that a Messiah, not just a spiritual leader, but a warrior king, was coming to overthrow the Romans and free them all.
And this timeline, it really shows you this whole thing with Jesus didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was the latest chapter in a long, bloody story of resistance. From the moment Rome first set foot in Jerusalem, the whole region was basically in a low-grade state of war. So when a new popular movement started to bubble up, you can bet the Roman authorities weren't thinking, oh, a new spiritual awakening. They were thinking, here we go again, another potential uprising.
So with that incredibly volatile scene set, let's start re-examining the evidence. We're going to look at the words and actions of Jesus himself, but we're going to try and see them through the eyes of a very nervous Roman governor, not a follower.
This is the absolute key to our investigation. We have to try, just for a moment, to strip away 2,000 years of religious meaning and ask ourselves, what would a guy like Pontius Pilate, a man whose entire career hung on keeping this province from exploding, what would he have heard when Jesus and his followers were talking?
This slide illustrates what might be one of the biggest communication gaps in history. The core of Jesus' message was the kingdom of God. Now, to us today, that sounds spiritual, right? It's about heaven, an internal state of being. But to a Roman official in first-century Judea, hearing a charismatic leader drawing huge crowds by talking about a new kingdom, well, that could only mean one thing: a rival government, a challenge to Caesar, a call for revolution. They're hearing completely different things.
And let's look at some other pieces of evidence. The title Son of God wasn't just a religious term back then, it was an official title of the Roman emperor. So for someone else to use it, that was politically charged, to say the least. And when Jesus cleansed the temple, he wasn't just flipping over some tables. He was staging a protest at an institution whose leaders were basically handpicked and controlled by Rome. It looked like a direct attack on the local power structure that Rome itself had set up.
Okay, so we've got the context, we've looked at the evidence through a political lens. Now let's connect the dots. Let's figure out Rome's motive and see how, from their perspective, the verdict was pretty much inevitable.
Just put yourself in Pontius Pilate's shoes for a second. You've got a checklist. 1. A new, charismatic leader shows up. 2. He starts gathering a huge, passionate following. 3. He's talking about a new kingdom, and people are calling him a king. 4. He then takes direct action against an institution you control. You know what? It doesn't even matter what his real intentions were. The perception was that this was a budding rebellion. And for a Roman governor in a place like Judea, perception was reality. You couldn't afford to be wrong.
And that, right there, is the heart of it. The Roman Empire wasn't worried about Jesus' theology. They were worried about the threat he posed, whether it was real or just perceived.
to their absolute control over a very valuable and very volatile piece of territory. For Rome, this was a political calculation, not a theological debate.
This chart just lays it out in the starkest terms possible. Crucifixion was a tool of the state. It was a horrifying public spectacle designed for one reason and one reason only: to scare the living daylights out of anyone else who was thinking about rebelling. It was the punishment they saved for enemies of the state: rebels, pirates, escaped slaves. It simply wasn't the penalty for having a different philosophy.
So, after all this, what's our historical investigation conclude? When we look at all the evidence through this political lens, where does it lead us?
The verdict from this particular investigation is pretty clear. Now, setting aside all the questions of faith and divinity, which is a totally different conversation, the historical man Jesus was arrested, tried, and executed by the Roman state. And the charge was political. The charge was sedition. He was killed because the people in power perceived him to be a threat to the stability of the Roman Empire.
And that kind of brings us to our final thought. Looking at it this way isn't meant to take away from anyone's faith, but to add a layer, a richer understanding of the historical moment. It's a powerful reminder that the official story is often just one version of what happened, usually the version told by the winners. So it leaves us with a bigger question, doesn't it? If we can find this hidden political drama here, in one of the most well-known stories of all time, what other truths might be buried in the histories we think we know best?